This is the bare knuckle round with Pierre Poilievre on Mark Carney, who was the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada governor. And so he's looking to be going into the Liberal fold. This is his first shot at
critical window
hard-hitting
dressing here.
politics. Check it out.
Mr. Carney, it would cost your shareholders for you to recognize the Chinese genocide of the Uyghur people, because you're planning to move a third of your company's $500 billion portfolio to that country. But it would be the right thing to do. And it would be a courageous thing to do. So yes or no? No, you don't interrupt my question. I haven't asked it yet.
Okay.
Will you recognize on behalf of your company the genocide perpetrated by China against the Uyghur people? Yes or no?
Madam Chair, point of order.
One moment, I'll stop the clock. Yes, Mr. Assassi, what is your point of order?
Madam Chair, as the member is fully aware, questions have to, first of all, not be repetitive. Secondly, they have to be relevant to the study that is before
genocide is
this
not relevant.
committee.
First, lobbying rules were not relevant.
Mr. Poilievre, I am trying to hear the point of order. Can you please hold one moment, please? Mr. Assassi, you have the floor.
All of the members are fully aware that the topic of this study before us today is economic recovery. And yet, the member continues to ask repetitive questions that have nothing to do with economic recovery that Canadians are looking forward to. So I would please ask the member to refrain from continuing to ask questions that really do not fall within the ambit of today's study.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Madam Stubbs, I'm about to rule on this point of order.
Great.
Is it with relation to this point of order?
It is.
Go ahead.
So the name of the motion of the study says supporting industries in their transition to greener and more sustainable practices, talks about innovation initiatives. That's exactly the kind of things that Brookfield Assets is invested in. It's exactly the reason why Mr. Carney is here to address the committee. The MP Poilievre is clearly asking questions related to Brookfield Asset Management, which has investments in this exact area, which is the topic of the study, and where Brookfield Asset Management is invested, it is quite clearly relevant. And it seems to me that an accepted practice additionally in committee is that witnesses don't necessarily determine the topic or the questions it is that they want to answer. Since you yourself has said that the time belongs to the Member of Parliament, I think the Member of Parliament should be allowed to use his time accordingly, and the witness should be compelled to answer his questions. Thanks, Chair.
So thank you very much for your point. I see MP Massey on the same point of order. Go ahead.
Real quickly, Madam Chair. Our most recent trade agreement with the United States, which has been upheld by the Deputy Prime Minister as being kind of a template for future agreements, includes labor and environmental provisions. That's with the United States. So as awkward as it is, I think some of these questions are relevant. It would be nice to give the witnesses a little bit extra space to be able to answer, but that's just my opinion, is that they're relevant, and the Parliamentary Secretary's objections to these are not warranted nor fair, because the reality is it's been upheld by his own Deputy Prime Minister that labor and environmental rights are important parts of trade agreements, unless they don't believe that. But that's the reality of what we actually passed and what is in front of us.
Thank you very much. I think we have Mr. Erskine Smith also on the same point of order. You're on mute.
Just briefly, Chair, to my recollection, the witness did acknowledge human rights concerns and violations, recognize that did not want to see supply chains that move through those that were affected by those human rights concerns. And the specific question in relation to whether this meets the international definition of genocide that we have weighed in by way of debate in our own House of Commons, I don't see how that particular question is relevant for this witness in the course of this hearing. If he chooses to answer, so be it. If he has a view of it, so be it. We all, I think, as members of Parliament, having recently debated, have a view of it. I don't entirely see the relevance for the purpose of this hearing.
Thank you very much. And I would like to be able to rule on this. MP Assassi?
I think if anyone does look at the record, Madam Chair, first of all, they're repetitive, the questions that the member has asked. Secondly, just to echo the sentiments of Mr. Erskine-Smith, if we're getting into the ethics commissioner, if we're getting into human rights, surely we can all agree that that is not relevant to the issue that is before this committee.
Okay, one moment. Okay, I would like to rule on the point of order because we also would have other witnesses here and we have time still to ask questions, and I want to make sure all the members have their chance to ask questions. With respect to the specific question that was posed by MP Poilievre, I believe the witness has already answered it, as has indicated by Mr. Erskine-Smith. I will ask that we remain on topic. You still have a few minutes left in your intervention. The question on whether or not the situation is genocide is not relevant to the study at hand. However, I will ask MP Poilievre to continue. I'm ruling yes, Mr. Poilievre.
Well, it is relevant because the investments that Mr. Carney is bragging about in China do support the regime that is carrying out the genocide. So if we're going to have a just recovery, build back better, then we have to, and create solidarity, which Mr. Carney has spoken about today, then we have to know what his position is on this subject. So it is relevant.
Mr. Poilievre, I've ruled that the question of what we are not studying whether this is genocide or not. We are studying economic recovery. Right. So I'm going to ask you, for the sake of the other MPs here on committee who want to have their time as well, could I ask you to please continue your questions of the witness and please make sure they are relevant to the study. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, they can bubble wrap the witness all they want, but these are serious questions to which Canadians deserve answers. I'll move on to another one because Mr. Carney refused to answer the last one. Do you support the Prime Minister's decision to veto the Northern Gateway pipeline, Mr. Carney?
I understand the veto of the Northern Gateway pipeline.
You support it?
Given both environmental and commercial reasons.
Do you support it?
I think it is sensible. I wasn't involved in the decision, but I think it was the right decision.
And yet your company has invested billions of dollars in oil companies in both Brazil and the UAE to buy pipelines. You bought billions of dollars of pipelines as a company in the last 5 years. Do you support those investments?
Mr. Poilievre, there is a global energy system, and one of the issues, I'm trying to explain a bit of how the economy works. One of the
Thank
issues,
you so much.
It may help. One of the issues for this committee in thinking about a sustainable transition.
Do you support it?
Where is Canada's role in those as energy transitions from fossil fuels to renewables? And in different jurisdictions, into different geography, it matters. It matters, and this is a fundamental point.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. This is a fundamental. You're finally getting to a point
You've exceeded
that
the
is
time.
relevant to this committee's inquiry.
What you're saying is you oppose pipelines in Canada, but you support them in the UAE and in Brazil. That's what you've actually said.
There are specific.
That's your double standard.
It is not a double standard.
It is a double standard.
No, it's not.
You make billions of dollars off foreign pipelines, and you shut them down here at home, putting our people out of work.
That you are a representative of the Canadian people, and one of your responsibilities, including at this committee,
is to fight for Canadian jobs, and not foreign jobs like you.
Exactly, to fight for Canadian jobs, and the types of Canadian jobs that are durable and are going to move forward.
Right.
I grew up in Alberta. I know the innovative nature of that.
Well, go try to give that answer back in Alberta, because I grew up there too, and I can tell you the people. I can tell you the people of Alberta would be ashamed with the answer you just gave. That you would give billions of dollars to foreign pipelines while not allowing Canadians to build pipelines here at home. That is the kind of elite Davos hypocrisy.
Could I please,
Madam Chair, this is really unbecoming of a member to badger any witness. This is really, truly unacceptable.
So We have a point of order from Monsieur Lemire. Vas-y, Monsieur Lemire.
Je veux juste apporter le point de la traduction.
I just wanted to note that the translation is very difficult. We know that the conditions are very difficult for interpreters. It's very hard in virtually, so I think that we should act professionally. Thank you, Mr. Lemire. That was the point that I've been trying to make since the beginning of the meeting, that we should not be speaking over each other, because then you can't do translation.
Members, I want you to be able to ask your question, and I want the witness to be able to answer, but please don't talk over each other so that we can actually have the translation. So with that, continue, Mr. Poilievre.
Thank you. Mr. Carney, you've just said you support your leader's decision to kill a Western Canadian pipeline that ships the most ethical product in the world. Yet you also support your company's decision to invest billions of dollars in foreign pipelines in Brazil and in the UAE. It's clear that this is not about the environment. If it were, you'd be consistent and you'd oppose fossil fuels everywhere. But you're happy to profit off of foreign fossil fuel companies while killing jobs among our own people. How do you address that flagrant hypocrisy? It smacks of the Davos elite at its worst.
Okay. First thing, absolutely, I support Canadian jobs, and I support Canadian jobs today and tomorrow. And in order to have those jobs tomorrow, what we need and what this committee can contribute is an energy transition. The Canadian fossil fuels, Canadian companies will play an essential role. Brookfield itself is heavily invested in Canada, including in energy infrastructure for fossil fuels. But it's also, and we connect collectively as Canadians, and we look to our parliament to support this, need to be putting in place the energies and industries of the future. That means carbon capture and storage. That means blue hydrogen. And both of which are absolutely essential for Canadian jobs in my home province of Alberta. And that's where the future lies. Now, we need to have the overall picture, which is why, and I'll finish with this, Chair, I emphasize the clear pathways, walking back from that, not jumping on specifics, and not seeing the bigger picture, nor providing the support that Canadians deserve.
Thank you very much. Our next round goes to MP Erskine Smith. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair. Mr. Carney, I want to start with you. We have come a long way on climate action since 2015, the rising price on pollution, phasing out coal-fired electricity, methane rules, and then in the recent December climate plan, updated climate plan, but also in the recent budget, we see a collective $8 billion clean tech innovation fund, a home retrofit program, and more. You've also advocated for quite a while now for greater climate disclosure, and that has a significant place in the budget. When we look at the scale of investment required, we've heard from Oxford's Economic Recovery Project. They've said Canada isn't in the top tier of countries that are investing in a green recovery. We're investing a lot, obviously, by way of the recent budget, but we are not in the top tier of countries around the world. You've said, I think, you don't do it through one budget. When we look at the scale of investment, how much more does Canada need to bring to bear towards a green transition?
Thank you, Mr. Erskine Smith. I think let me start with something Mr. Bradley said in his opening remarks, which gave a sense of the scale of what we required in the electricity sector. So, and forgive me, Mr. Bradley, but I agree on the order of magnitude, I believe, of $1.3 trillion of investment over time. And these are enormous sums, but they're also consistent with taking what is a remarkable system at present, almost 85% zero emission at present across Canada, bringing it to 100% zero emission, and then really on the order of magnitude of doubling, and on some estimates potentially tripling that capacity over the next few decades, with electricity at the heart, not just of energy, but of home heating, of transportation, many industrial processes, and on. And so there is a scale that gives one sense of the orders of magnitude of investment. Now, that 1.3 trillion, what is not being asked is that is the federal government is, of course, supplying that, nor necessarily provincial governments. There are roles to play. There are key things that both levels of government can do. We can help with interties. We can provide incentives to accelerate, particularly on the demand side, for key emerging technologies that are not just for generation, but also for storage, such as hydrogen. Mr. Bradley rightly, in my judgment, referenced small modular reactors as another opportunities. But a lot of the capital, a lot of the investment will come from the companies themselves, and some of them are publicly owned firms, but effectively private sector capital that will be reinvested.
Can I ask on the $8 billion net zero accelerator, would you support hiving off some percentage of that for a breakthrough fund?
In terms of breakthrough technology,
high risk, high reward.
Yes, I agree. I know what you mean, and I would agree with it. In the interest of time, I'll just say yes.
And you've written, financial markets increasingly recognize that sustainable investment is the new horizon that can bring enormous opportunities ranging from transforming energy to reinventing protein. Do you think we also need to, as it relates to high risk, high reward, look at alternative proteins as well?
It's an enormous opportunity, and pea protein, for example, is a big and growing business, an opportunity for our Canadian farmers. Yes.
When we look at financing in the additional investment we're going to need, and when we look back at the scale of spending we've seen even in the COVID crisis and the disproportionate impacts of the COVID crisis on different parts of our society, you've previously written, high income inequalities are dwarfed by staggering wealth inequalities. Now, you've written recently about how the market price has increasingly become divorced from human value. Mariana Mazzucato has written about this as well. You both, to my knowledge, have said we need to move beyond GDP. She has embraced wealth taxation, though. And I wonder, would you support a move towards a greater conversation about fair taxation in this country as we build back better in that language? But would you support a greater conversation around wealth taxation?
I think the first thing is to, if I may, is to dimension what we need to do. Your first line of questioning, which is on the orders of magnitude of the investment we need for sustainable growth and inclusive growth, bring that in the context of our existing budgetary envelope, in other words, our existing revenue envelope, think about how we can optimize within that, and only then move to these broader issues. I'm a strong believer that the best way to reduce inequalities is to grow opportunity for a broader range of Canadians. I understand why we haven't discussed it, Chair, but I'll just refer to my supporting documents around a digital strategy, because I think that can play a huge role in reducing inequality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Notre prochain tour, c'est député Lemire.
Member Lemire, you have 2.5.
This continues on. Stay tuned for the next episode of Versus Mark Carney in the comments. Do you think that Mark Carney is going to stay into politics? He's going to be in there longer? He's going to get right back into this thing? Possibly be the new finance minister? Or leader? What do you think? Leave your comments below. Like, subscribe. Have a good day.